of the most unexpectedly interesting films in modern horror cinema arrived recently, since for many, the vampire genre is quite overdone. However, Sinners is a work written and directed by Ryan Coogler, bringing us a story that blends vampires, music, tragedy, and redemption in a truly sublime way. Set in the 1930s in the heart of the Mississippi Delta, the film transports us to a time where the Great Depression, institutional racism, and the ghosts of the past haunt not only the social sphere, but the spiritual one as well. This is where we meet the protagonists, twin brothers Smoke and Stack Moore, two former World War I soldiers and ex-mobsters who return to their hometown with the idea of starting over. But as we'll see in this story, the past never stays behind. Their plan seems simple. Use the money they stole from mobsters in Chicago to buy an old sawmill owned by a white supremacist and turn it into a juke joint. That is, a music and dance club exclusively for the local African American community. The place not only represents an economic opportunity for the brothers, but also a symbolic act of cultural liberation. To complete this dream, the twins invite their young cousin Samy, a talented blues guitarist with a supernatural gift. His music has the power to evoke such deep emotions that, unknowingly, it can also open spiritual portals where the past, present, and future blend together. This ability is not entirely welcomed in his family, especially by his father, Jedediah, a strict pastor who sees blues as sinful music that only attracts evil. From the beginning, the film establishes that music will be more than just an aesthetic element. It will be the weapon, the conflict, and the redemption of the characters. And as if all this weren't enough, we simultaneously witness how an ancient and dark threat arrives in town. An Irish vampire named Remik, who is fleeing from a group of Native Americans from the Choctaw tribe. Remick, who appears frail and wounded, is taken in by a local couple, but soon reveals his true nature, initiating a chain of horrors that will mark everyone involved.
Yes, you do. You all do.
Sinners is not just another vampire film, it is a story about music as a spiritual and cultural inheritance, about the temptation that always waits behind closed doors, and about how we confront sin when it disguises itself as promises. With brilliant direction, hypnotic cinematography, and a top-tier cast, this film earned a place as one of the best horror films of recent times. But to understand why it is so interesting, we have to dive into its story, and more importantly, into the monsters that inhabit it. The story of Sinners begins in an apparently calm way, but one filled with tension. Smoke and Stack, better known as the Moore twins, return to the small town of Clarksdale after years of violence in the streets of Chicago. After serving in World War I and working for mobsters, they're tired of crime and want to redeem themselves with a business of their own. With the money stolen from their former bosses, they buy an old sawmill from a racist man and local Ku Klux Klan leader named Hogwood. Their goal is to transform it into a juke joint, with the hope of offering an unforgettable night and raising enough money to settle unfinished business. To make it happen, the twins recruit several acquaintances from the town. Samy, their young cousin, will be the main musician. Also joining them are Delta Slim, a legendary pianist, Perlin, a singer with a beautiful voice, Cornbread, a strong man who will serve as security, Annie, Smoke's former wife, as the cook, and Grace and Bo Chow, a Chinese shopkeeper couple who will supply them with provisions. That same night in the juke joint, Samy performs for the audience. His performance is so powerful that it awakens deep emotions and even attracts supernatural presences to the place. Spirits from the past and the future seem to respond to his music. But unknowingly, Samy has played a melody so powerful that it also catches the attention of Remick and his newly formed clan. Remick and his two new companions arrive at the juke joint posing as wandering musicians. They offer to play and pay, but Smoke and Stack are suspicious and don't let them in. However, Mary, Stack's ex-girlfriend, tells them they need the money and offers to speak with them. In secret, Mary meets with Remick and is bitten. She becomes a vampire and returns to the juke joint, where she seduces Stack, bites him, and transforms him as well. At this point, it's clear that Remick doesn't just want blood, he wants Samy. Not out of hunger, but because of his musical gift. Because, as we'll see later, Samy's music can open portals no vampire can. and this is a very desired ability among them. Remick, on the other hand, is not just any vampire. He's not a European count nor a Gothic novel aristocrat. He is the product of suffering, colonization, hunger, and loss. In Sinners, it is revealed, although not directly, that Remick is Irish, and that his transformation into a vampire likely occurred during the Irish Great Famine between 1845 and 1852, a tragedy caused by British Empire exploitation, which left over 1 million dead and many more displaced. Because of this, Remick represents that open wound and ancestral resentment, which shows us that he is not just a monster, but a tragic villain. Upon arriving in the United States, Remick didn't simply seek to feed. What he wants is to reconnect with the spirits of his people. He believes that, through Samy and his music, he can achieve that. But his method is not spiritual communion, it is possession. Remick wants to absorb Samy's gift, integrate him into his vampire horde, and use him as a channel to bring back his community, no matter who he has to drag with him in the process. And that is where his true face is revealed. Remick is not a savior of his people. He is a colonizer of souls. Because the vampires and sinners are undead creatures, trapped between life and death. They are beings who, when they bite their victims, kill them, but also bring them back in an altered, empty form. Unlike other myths, here there is no ambiguity. Everyone who is bitten turns. Once transformed, vampires retain their human appearance, but also reveal certain aspects of their condition. Their eyes glow with a supernatural red light, even in the dark. Their fangs grow and multiply, distorting their mouths. In cases like cornbread's, that transformation is grotesque, almost painful. Remick, as the leader of the vampires, displays more advanced abilities. He can transform his fingers into sharp claws. He can levitate and absorb the memories of everyone he terms, as well as having greater control over his power. But the most unsettling thing is their mental connection, since all the vampires in the horde share a psychic link with Remick and function as a kind of hive mind. They share memories, emotions, and even skills, like when Remick learns Chinese after turning Bo Chow. This mental connection not only makes them more dangerous strategically, but also depersonalizes them. As they integrate into the collective, they lose their individuality and become extensions of the same body. And in that body, Remick is the heart. Although the vampires and sinners are powerful, terrifying, and almost impossible to distinguish from a normal human, they also have clear weaknesses, deeply rooted in the classic folklore of the vampire myth. Ryan Coogler chose to keep many of those original elements, but he reinvents them with a symbolic weight that goes far beyond aesthetics. The first weakness we see is the oldest and most symbolic of all, but one that has been almost completely lost in many modern iterations: the need for an invitation. Vampires cannot enter any closed place like a house, a castle, or a temple, unless someone explicitly invites them. This rule is not just a physical limitation, it is a reflection of spiritual consent, because evil cannot enter your life unless you open the door to it. And in the film, that literally happens, when Grace, in a moment of desperation to save her daughter, screams and invites the vampires to enter, opening the door not only of the juke joint, but also of her soul. Then we have garlic, presented here in a particularly creative way. Annie uses garlic juice and vinegar to drive Stack away when he awakens as a vampire. The reaction is immediate, as his skin burns. This is because in folklore, garlic is not just a plant, it is a barrier that purifies and protects. We're also told that vampires can be harmed by silver and holy water, although only silver is used directly during the film when Samy, in an act of total resistance, uses his guitar decorated with a silver disc to strike Remick in the head. Although this only stuns him and doesn't really cause significant damage. Sunlight is, as in many other works, the final sentence for vampires. Unlike some modern versions where vampires are only weakened by the sun or even sparkle, in Sinners the dawn completely disintegrates them and releases their soul. And of course there's the classic wooden stake to the heart. But there is an even more curious weakness, and that is the psychic bond that ties them. Because of this, if the leader of the horde, in this case Remick, suffers pain or is wounded, all the others feel it. This not only affects their effectiveness in combat, but it also reveals a vulnerability that can be exploited. Being so connected, what gives them strength also makes them fragile. In summary, the vampires of sinners are not invincible, but facing them requires knowledge, and it's not enough to just shoot them, as this practically has no effect on them. To defeat them, one must understand what they represent, and have the courage to resist the temptation and promises they bring with them. Beyond the supernatural horror, Sinners is a human tragedy. At the center of the story, we have three characters who represent different paths in the face of pain, loss, and temptation: Stack, Mary, and Samy. Each one makes decisions that lead them toward opposite destinies, but they all share something in common. They are broken inside, searching for something to save them, and that is precisely what makes them vulnerable to vampirism. Stack is the first great symbol of downfall, a man divided by guilt, by the past he left behind, and by the inability to forgive himself. When Mary returns to his life and he believes there's a chance for romantic redemption, he lets his guard down and doesn't realize that she has already been turned by Remick. And when he finally gives in to his desire for her, he is bitten and transformed. Stack does not consciously choose vampirism, but he also doesn't fight against it, because he is someone who had already given up long before. Mary, for her part, is a somewhat tragic figure, because she is caught between two societies that look at her with suspicion. And when she is bitten by Remick, she doesn't just become a vampire. She becomes part of a system of control that makes her feel powerful for the first time in her life. And yet she doesn't completely lose her humanity, because in several moments of the film, we see Mary hesitate. Something in her still resists, especially when she witnesses Amy's death. It is that moment, that duality, that drives her to run away. Because although she can no longer become human again, she also cannot fully surrender to darkness. And at the center of it all is Samy, the young man with a gift he doesn't fully understand. His music has the power to heal, to connect with the dead, to invoke the past and the future. But it's also what puts him in danger. Remick doesn't want to kill him. He wants to consume him, absorb his power, and use him as a conduit. That's why he offers him belonging, immortality, and the promise of a world without racism or suffering. A world where Samy could play forever, without fear and without rejection. And I think that is the most important moment of the entire film. The ultimate temptation. And that is where Samy shows his strength. Not physical, but spiritual. Because when Remick attacks him, tries to drown him and force him to surrender, Samy clings to his faith and to his father's teachings. And instead of giving in, he raises his guitar, the same one he used to summon spirits, and uses it as a weapon. Smoke, who has seen his wife die, faced his brother, and lost him in the process, is the one who finishes it. With a stake, he destroys Remick's heart, something that leaves the horde stunned just as the sun is rising, burning them all. However, Smoke makes one last decision: to face Hogwood and the members of the clan who were coming to attack the juke joint. He dies because of this decision, yes, but he does so as a hero, as a free man who at the end reunites with his wife and son on the other side. From its first minute, Sinners establishes that we are not just watching another vampire movie, but a story filled with spiritual symbols and biblical and historical references. The title itself, Sinners, already speaks to us of a moral and eternal struggle between desire and redemption. Ryan Coogler doesn't use these elements as decoration. He makes them the axis of the story, giving each character an almost mythical dimension. The most representative figure of this spiritual conflict is Jedediah, Samy's father, a stern pastor who sees in his son's music an open door to sin. His warning is a direct echo of Genesis 4:7, which states, "Sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." In that context, music, in this case the blues, becomes a double metaphor. It can save or it can damn. And that is precisely Samy's dilemma, because his music connects realms, unites the pain of entire generations, and draws in those who find no peace. When he sings, he doesn't do it just for art. He does it because he needs to find meaning, identity, and a place to belong. And that's where the figure of Remick comes in, who represents the purest temptation. The end of the film, set 60 years later, is an epiphany. Samy, now old, receives a visit from Stack and Mary, who are still young. They offer him immortality once more, and Samy refuses. Stack, in the end, looks at Samy and says that day was the last time he saw his brother, the last time he saw the sun, the only time he felt free. And with those words, we understand that Sinners isn't about monsters, but about trapped souls in a search for freedom. And with that, we reach the end of this video. I hope you liked it, and if you did, remember to give me a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with my new videos. See you in the next one. Hey, don't go just yet. If you enjoyed this video, I've got another one I think you'll love. Check it out.